Greetings, fellow men. Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again, and today I want to talk about what Donald Trump means for Europe, what he could do for Europe. So, of course, the state-run media and all the celebrities in Germany are all hyperventilating now because they cannot believe what this fascist Donald Trump is doing. Yeah, I think they're also panicking because Donald Trump and what he does right now after his inauguration shows everybody in the Western world clearly that a politician that is elected does not always have to repeat the things that the people before him did and or basically not do anything, waste a lot of time and just lie to them again and break all his promises. Donald Trump shows right now that a politician that is democratically elected can actually do what he promised, and he can do it fast. And this is so interesting, I think, because for decades now, I think all of our politicians in Europe, they more or less conspired in order to make us believe that change is not possible, that whoever you elect, it will always be the same, and they cannot really do anything. The politicians always said that the people you can vote for don't have the real power, and the people who have the real power you cannot vote for. And of course, there is some truth to that because politicians are not omnipotent gods who can just decide stuff. In the Western world, we have the business, we have the industry, we have investors, we have quote unquote the global finance market. And yeah, they are groups with interests, or they are basically distributed large groups with an interest, and they are also players. But the politicians also have some power, and Donald Trump is showing that very clearly, that the politicians who are elected by the people, whose job it is to fight for the people, to defend the people, to keep them from harm, and to get good deals for them, as he puts it, that is also a player on the field, and a very powerful one, of course. Now, I want to give you a little example of what I mean, that our politicians made us believe that the situation cannot really be changed and we just have to go along with everything. It was Angela Merkel's line that there is no alternative to something, right? She always repeated that, and it became a kind of a joke, and this is why she stopped using it, but she basically said the same thing, but she avoided the phrase alternativlos, or it's an adjective. It means something is without alternative, right? And this is, by the way, also why our new conservative party is called the Alternative für Deutschland. It is actually the alternative for Germany, and it basically is a reminder of what Merkel always said when she did something. She said, this is without alternative, kind of reality, or the facts are forcing me to do that. But it's not really true. I mean, in some instances it's true, but it's not always true, right? And I want to give you an example of a situation where it is kind of true. So for example, that we have strong unions in Germany, and after a certain interval of time, the association of the employers negotiates with the unions in order to settle for the union wages, for those jobs, for those industries that have union contracts. We call that principle Tarifautonomie. That means that the associations of the employers and the unions can negotiate freely without the state's involvement, and they can negotiate their contracts. Now, our unions are not basically blackmailing the employers by saying, you better give us 50% more money or we burn the factory down. That's not what they do. German unions have a reputation of being very modest and actually being very reasonable with their demands. And I know there is a lot of propaganda out there about unions, and I also don't like the union people so much, but I have to admit, now that I see what is going on really, that they argue fairly rationally. For example, I mean, if the productivity in a certain industry in a certain district goes up 5% since the last negotiations, and the profits went up 3%, and the inflation is 2%, they would go to the employers and say, look, the inflation is this and this. The productivity per worker went up this and this, and your profits rose by this much. So we demand 2 or 3% or whatever, 5% more wages, and then they negotiate. In the end, they get half of that, and they call it a day. This is how it normally works, and this is reasonable because they argue with facts and they know that their workers that they represent are also consumers. Now, if the German product would become too expensive, for example, because the wages are rising stronger than the productivity or the company's profit margin, then even their own workers as a consumer household would buy the Chinese product and not the German product, for example, right? Because the cost of production would then be so high that the prices would have to go up and the product would in the end not be competitive anymore. The union men know that. This is why they are modest in what they ask, and this is an example that shows you how the interest of the markets or the global markets is actually just the cumulative or integrated will or interest or decision-making process of the consumers out there who have to decide what product they buy. And in the end, that influences then the union men when they negotiate with their employers. And the same thing goes for institutional investors, for example. So one of the biggest investors is, of course, the Saudi investment fund, right? And people can say now, all these evil Saudis, you know. But when you look at who also is a big institutional investor, you will see that the Norwegian pension fund, for example, is one of the biggest institutional investors in the world. And what is that? That is just the workers in Norway who want to retire at some point, and this pension fund is basically investing money in their name. And then in the end, they want to retire like all of us, right? So I wouldn't call that evil conspiracy, big money, global elites, blah, blah, blah. In the end, behind these funds are normal working men who want their pensions. So this is an example that I can really understand, where I can get behind the cause and say, okay, we have to be reasonable here, we have to do something, or maybe agree with something that we don't immediately like modest raises in our jobs instead of a big pay raise, right? Because the consequences would in the mid to long term be very disastrous for our own employment situation. This is something I can get behind, I can wrap my head around it, I can understand it. But if people start saying now that northern European countries should forever pay basically the deficit of southern European states, for example, yeah, or that we should just let millions and millions of people into Europe who cannot even read and write in their own language, who have a culture and a religion that makes them despise us, and who will never ever be able to integrate and to earn an honest living here. And even their children and their grandchildren will by and large never be able to keep up and compete with our children and grandchildren. It's just impossible in our very diversified, very highly advanced and specialized industry that we have here. And the very idea that these people will pay our pensions and our retirement at one point is just grotesque. It's ridiculous. It's something that is just never gonna happen. The amount of money that they cost us right now by just being here, by just having to be fed, and by just receiving a housing situation of some sort. I mean, even if you exclude violence and crime at all, like just for argument's sake now, imagine that all these foreigners would be completely peaceful angels and they wouldn't steal, they wouldn't rape, they wouldn't beat up young kids and stomp them on the ground and stuff like that. They wouldn't do all of that just by being here. It is already disastrous for our welfare system and for the public purse, basically. It is an absolutely tremendous amount of weight that is put on the German taxpayer at the moment, and we get nothing back. And now include all the violence, all the terrorism, all the rape, all that stuff that is going on now, violence that even qualitatively, even on a qualitative level, has never existed in Germany. Maybe going back to the 30 Years' War or something like that, has never existed in Germany. And our politicians keep telling us that there is no other way. This is the markets. Globalization requires that we do that, you know. They say that all these migrants coming into Germany is just the flip side of globalization. Yeah, right. As if the fact that we are trading goods with China somehow causes us to take in unvetted millions of people from southern countries. It is absolutely unsensical. It doesn't make any sense at all. And now, where the electorate and the population in Europe is really fed up with everything, and they have been told for decades now that we just should shut up and just do our work and just ignore all these things that are happening all around us and just march on into the same direction because there is no alternative. There is just one way forward, and we can never change anything. And now we have a president in the USA who, within his first week in office already, shows the entire world that there is another way, that you can actually keep your promises and not break them all in the first week. And by the way, break the law continuously like Merkel does, committing all these illegal acts that Merkel commits, breaking international contracts and our constitution daily. And this is why they're all afraid, and this is why they all are so vitriolic against Donald Trump. Not because they care about these people from these Arab countries that are for 90 days now banned from entering the US or something. I have no idea. I mean, this is not the reason why they are reacting that harshly. Because, by the way, Arab countries do the same thing with citizens of Israel, for example. You know, people have done this stuff before. This is not the first time that there is an immigration ban on certain countries, or that visa issuing is halted for a certain amount of time during an emergency or a dangerous situation. This is not unheard of. There are precedents, and people just ignore that, yeah, and they act as if this is the very first time and it's unheard of and it's outrageous. No, the reason, and you have to understand that, guys, the reason why they are all reacting so violently to what Trump does is that he shows, especially the people in the European countries where there will be elections soon, he shows them that there is another way, that there is an alternative, that you can actually vote for people who will do what they say they will do, who will not break their promises, who will try to do what they think is best for the people and what they told the people before. So you can disagree on the issues. You can always disagree on the issues. But Trump said this is what he thinks is good for America. This is what he thinks is good for the American people, to bring back jobs and to keep them safe from harm. And this is what he does now. The election was basically the test of whether or not the American people agree with his proposal, and America agreed to his proposal. So now he realizes his proposal. That, I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. This is how democracy is supposed to work. And please, guys, when you hear reports from Europe especially about how horrible the reputation of America gets now, and all the porcelain that Trump smashes on the diplomatic scene or something like that, don't give a fuck about that. Seriously, don't give a damn about that. The system in Europe, you know, these regimes we have here in Europe, the EU and all their cronies, they are pissing their pants at the moment that the people in Europe, because there is still some time left until these elections. If the elections were tomorrow, they would feel fine, but there is a lot of time that can pass, and they are pissing their pants at the moment because the people in Europe could actually witness what is going on in America, and after a certain while they would realize that the world doesn't end, and that the people can actually change the politics of a country in a profound manner by voting for a party that says so. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but Trump clearly shows that it is possible. And I'm sure that all the people who congratulated Donald Trump, meaning Marine Le Pen or Geert Wilders and also the AfD in Germany, all these people would probably do similar things in their own countries. And this is why the elites in Europe, the regimes that we have right now in Europe, are afraid. So, and by the way, I should also say only one very liberal guy today at the lunch table in the cafeteria at work was loudly complaining about how fascist Trump is. All the other people were looking down and they just said nothing. Nobody said anything. So it was screaming silence, I would say. So to wrap it up, Trump gives hope to all the patriots in Europe, and he scares the shit out of those people who for decades and decades told the people of Europe that they just need to endure everything and just keep on marching forward like the politicians tell them to. As always, have a nice evening and Servus, Kameraden.